We're going to discuss how to engage and communicate with students online. We are members of Duke Learning Innovation. We work on the online Duke team. I'm Heather Hands. I'm one of the learning experience designers that you'll be hearing from today. We also have Heather Valley and Michael Hudson, and we may eventually have Willie Williamson if we can track him down. If not, you'll hear from me again. We're happy to be here, and our team is charged with helping people develop and create and deliver online courses. So, this was really important to us to be able to help you guys as you're figuring out how to quickly teach remotely, some of the best practices and most efficient ways that you could get up to speed and go ahead and start delivering your course online. So our goals for the session are that by the end of the session, you will be able to plan how and when you will communicate with students online, identify available tools and approaches for online communication, establish guidelines for instructor to student communication and peer-to-peer communication online, and encourage peer-to-peer interaction and build community in your course. So first, I want to talk a bit about some of the basics of communicating with students online. One of the most important things is to communicate early and often. So frequency can be important because students don't have that face-to-face time or connection with you. So it's important that they hear from you more often than if you were in an in-person class where, you might send like one email out a week. So in this case, it'd probably be better to communicate on a more regular, say, at least a couple times a week basis or more, just depending on your plan. One thing that we particularly recommend is that you have a message at the beginning of each week that helps introduce the content that you're going to cover. It could include a link to the Zoom session for that week, and it can let students know how to prepare for that Zoom session. And it also has relevant due date reminders and other practical information as needed. And again, this can vary depending on, you might not be doing Zoom sessions, you might be doing multiple sessions. So this is just sort of, in general, some of the things that can help students be successful that week and understand what's coming up and what to expect. In addition, it can be important to send out any updates on changes to the course. In this particular case, many of you would want to consider, if you haven't already, sending out a message to your students sometime soon to let them know about the transition to teaching online for the rest of the semester, what that is probably going to involve. I realize you still might be figuring out some of those details, but hopefully at least some of your general plan for how you're going to communicate and interact and teach and learn online for the rest of the term. In addition, it can be a good idea to respond to common student questions in an email or message to everyone. So if you're getting a question multiple times, there probably are some other students out there who have the same question. So this can both save you time because other people won't be asking the same question of you individually. And probably it just ends up being a good point of clarification to make sure everyone's on the same page. Now I wanted to show a quick example of a good weekly message that Gayani, who is an instructor in global health, sent out. This actually happened to be posted a couple weeks ago, and Willie, who's one of our learning experience designers who worked on this course, saw it and saw that it was a really good example of how to set students up for the week. So as you can see, she talks about what they're going to cover in the live session that week and kind of what the main topics are. She asked them to bring other interesting news items. So she kind of has a learning activity or idea that she wants them to go ahead and be prepared with for that session. And she also talks about what we might not get to, but what you need to know at least a little bit about. And then finally, she gives the Zoom link for that week. So that's kind of an example of how you can cover some of both the content for the week and what you're expecting from them, as well as help them prepare if you are doing some sort of live session. It could be similar if you're also introducing a particular assignment or some other activity or interaction that you want to go ahead and let them know, here's what we have coming up this week. So in addition, when you're planning communication with students, it's a good idea to respond promptly to messages or emails. Again, because you don't have that face-to-face connection, students can get a bit more anxious about not hearing back from you. I assume you already experienced that some in your classes, that students might expect a very quick response from you. And so you may have already addressed these guidelines, but just in case this is still something that you're thinking through, we recommend having a plan for how students can reach you. And that could be one form or multiple forms of communication as ways to reach you. And also how quickly you'll respond or what your availability is each week. We recommend having this information in your syllabus, and along with it include any information on any of the tools you're using for communication, as well as for other aspects of your course. And we also recommend having tech support information. It could be specific to those tools, but also including some of the basic help desk information for OIT, just to make sure that they have a point of contact if they do run into issues with any of the tools. So before we start talking specifically about tools, I wanted to share this interesting graphic that was shared recently on Twitter and through a really interesting blog post. It was from Daniel Stanford, who is in the Teaching and Learning Department at DePaul University. And this gives a really good perspective on a number of different ways that you can communicate, interact, and achieve different elements of coursework online. One thing I really liked about this is that it emphasizes high bandwidth versus low bandwidth. So by high bandwidth, we mean something that students would need a more recent, well-working computer and a good internet connection to have the bandwidth to use appropriately. Whereas low bandwidth, you know, if it's kind of an old clunky computer or not the best internet connection, they still could, you know, make use of more basic tools. In addition, it's talking about immediacy in terms of how quickly they need to respond. So high immediacy would be like what we're doing right now. So you're in a session and you're responding in the moment immediately versus kind of the spectrum of on your own time or, you know, within a certain given period of time. An advantage of that is particularly now that students are home, they might have different demands or schedules than expected, and you know, they could potentially have work or also have a bunch of family members in the same house. So one advantage of something with less immediacy is that they can fit it into their schedule in a more flexible way. And so we recommend making some of those options available to them. A lot of the options that we're discussing today fall into the left bottom quadrant. So those are kind of tried and true elements of an online course. They're not necessarily the most glamorous. I know people get kind of like, oh, discussion boards, or yeah, sure, we can send out emails. But the good thing is that they're, you know, low bandwidth and immediacy, so they are flexible for a larger number of students. And I also thought this graphic was helpful just in terms of if you're thinking about trying to plan communication, interaction, and coursework. Ideally, you would want a combination of these, right? So you would want some that are more low bandwidth, low immediacy, and then kind of maybe some that are elsewhere on the spectrum. So that's just a way of thinking about this.